As soon as this week, Congress will begin debating these common-sense proposals to reduce gun violence. Your senators, Dick Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, they're here. Your representatives, John Larson, Rosa DeLauro, Elizabeth Esty, Jim Hines, Joe Courtney, they are all pushing to pass this legislation. But much of Congress is going to only act if they hear from you. The American people. So here's what we have to do. Audience member, I love you, Mr. President. President Obama, I appreciate that. Here's what we've got to do. We have to tell Congress it's time to require a background check for anyone who wants to buy a gun, so that people who are dangerous to themselves and others cannot get their hands on a gun. Let's make that happen. We have to tell Congress it's time to crack down on gun trafficking, so that folks will think. Twice before buying a gun as part of a scheme to arm someone who won't pass a background check. Let's get that done. We have to tell Congress it's time to restore the ban on military-style assault weapons, and a 10-round limit for magazines. To make it harder for a gunman to fire 154 bullets into his victims in less than 5 minutes. Let's put that to a vote. We have to tell Congress it's time to strengthen school safety and help people. Struggling with mental health problems get the treatment they need before it's too late. Let's do that for our kids and for our communities. Now, I know that some of these proposals inspire more debate than others. But each of them has the support of the majority of the American people. All of them are common sense. All of them deserve a vote. All of them deserve a vote. Consider background checks. Over the past 20 years, background checks have kept more than 2 million dangerous people from getting their hands on a gun. A group of police officers in Colorado told me last week that, thanks to background checks, they've been able to stop convicted murderers, folks under restraining orders for committing violent domestic abuse, from buying a gun. In some cases, they've actually arrested the person as they were coming to purchase the gun. So we know that background checks can work. But the problem is loopholes in the current law let so many people avoid background checks. Altogether, that's not safe. It doesn't make sense. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you go through a background check to buy a gun, wouldn't you expect other people to play by the same rules? If you're a law-abiding gun seller, wouldn't you want to know you're not selling your gun to someone who's likely to commit a crime? Shouldn't we make it harder? Not easier for somebody who is convicted of domestic abuse to get his hands on a gun? It turns out 90% of Americans think so. "90% of Americans support universal background checks." Think. About that. How often do 90% of Americans agree on anything? And yet, 90% agree on this: Republicans, Democrats, folks who own guns. Folks who don't own guns, 80% of Republicans, more than 80% of gun owners. More than 70% of NRA households. It is common sense. And yet, there is only one thing that can stand in the way of change that just about everybody agrees on. And that's politics in Washington. You would think that with those numbers Congress would rush to make this happen. That's what you would think. If our democracy is working the way it's supposed to, and 90% of the American people agree on something, in the wake of a tragedy, you'd think this would not be a heavy lift. And yet, some folks back in Washington are already floating the idea that they may use political stunts to prevent votes on any of these reforms. Think about that. They're not just saying they'll vote no on ideas that almost all Americans support. They're saying they'll do everything they can to even prevent any votes on these provisions. They're saying your opinion doesn't matter. And that's not right. Audience, boo. President Obama, that is not right. Audience, we want to vote. President Obama, we need a vote. Audience, we want a vote. We want a vote. President Obama, we need a vote. Audience, we want a vote. President Obama, now, I've also heard some in the Washington press suggest that what happens to Gun violence legislation in Congress this week will either be a political victory or defeat for me. Connecticut, this is not about me. This is not about politics. This is about doing the right thing for all the families who are here that have been torn apart by gun violence. It's about them and all the families going forward, so we can prevent this from happening again. That's what it's about. It's about the law enforcement officials putting their lives at risk. That's what this is about. This is not about politics. This is not about politics. This is about these families and families all across the country who are saying let's make it a little harder for our kids to get gunned down. When I said in my State of the Union address that these proposals deserve a vote, that families of Newtown, and Aurora, and Tucson, and a former member of Congress, Gabby Giffords, that they all deserved a vote. Virtually every member of that chamber stood up and applauded. And now they're going to start denying your families a vote when the cameras are off and when the lobbyists have worked what they do. You deserve better than that. You deserve a vote. Now, look, we knew from the beginning of this debate that change would not be easy. We knew that there would be powerful interests that are very good at confusing the subject. That are good at amplifying conflict and extremes, that are good at drowning out rational debate. Good at ginning up irrational fears, all of which stands in the way of progress. But if our history teaches us anything, then it's up to us the people to stand up to those who say we can't. or we won't stand up for the change that we need. And I believe that that's what the American people are looking for. When I first ran for this office, I said that I did not believe the country was as divided as our politics would suggest, and I still believe that. I know sometimes, when you watch cable news or talk radio, or you browse the internet, you'd think, man, everybody just hates each other, everybody is just at each other's throats. But that's not how most Americans think about these issues. There are good people on both sides of every issue. So if we're going to move forward, we can't just talk past one another. We've got to listen to one another. That's what Governor Malloy and all these legislative leaders did. That's why they were able to pass bipartisan legislation. I've got stacks of letters from gun owners who want me to know that they care passionately about their right to bear arms. Don't want them infringed upon, and I appreciate every one of those letters. I've learned from them. But a lot of those letters, what they've also said is they're not just gun owners. They're also parents or police officers or veterans. And they agree that we can't stand by and keep letting these tragedies happen. That with our rights come some responsibilities and obligations to our communities and ourselves, and most of all to our children. We can't just think about us, we've got to think about we, the people. I was in Colorado. I told a story about Michelle. She came back from a trip to rural Iowa. We were out there campaigning. Sometimes it would be miles between farms, let alone towns. And she said, you know, coming back, I can understand why somebody would want a gun for protection. If somebody drove up into the driveway and, Barack, you weren't home. The sheriff lived miles away, I might want that security. So she can understand what it might be like in terms of somebody wanting that kind of security. On the other hand, I also talked to a hunter last week who said, all my experiences with guns have been positive. But I also realize that for others, all their experiences with guns have been negative. And when he said that, I thought about the mom I met from suburban Chicago whose son was killed in a random shooting. And this mom told me, I hate it when people tell me that my son was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was on his way to school. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. He was in the right place at the right time, and he still got shot. The kids at Sandy Hook were where they were supposed to be. So were those moviegoers in Aurora. So were those worshippers in Oak Creek. So was Gabby Giffords. She was at a supermarket, listening to the concerns of her constituents. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. They were also exercising their rights to assemble peaceably, to worship freely and safely.